Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into a topic that's, well, it's about as complicated as it gets: terrorism. It's a challenge that has really shaped our laws, our security, and pretty much our whole society for decades. So, to figure out how we deal with it, we first have to get a handle on what it even is. All right, let's get into it.
And boom, right out of the gate, we hit this central problem. This one quote, it just nails the core difficulty of defining terrorism, doesn't it? The label itself is so loaded, so political, and that makes trying to create any kind of universal response incredibly tough.
So to get a grip on this, we have to start with what the threat actually looks like today. And here in the United States, this is not just some far-off foreign issue anymore. It's become a domestic problem, one that has evolved to the point where our own intelligence agencies are calling it a major, persistent threat.
And this isn't some abstract idea. These are real, tragic events that have left deep, deep scars. We're talking about the slaughter of black church members in Charleston, a synagogue targeted in Pittsburgh, a gunman opening fire at a Walmart in El Paso, a protester run down in Charlottesville, and of course, the attack on the U.S. Congress. These events show you the devastating, real-world cost of this threat.
Okay, so you can't fight an enemy you can't define. That's rule number one. But honestly, this is one of the biggest hurdles. There is no single definition of terrorism that everyone in the world agrees on, and that complicates everything, from how police investigate to how countries can even work together on it.
Let's start with how the U.S. Department of Defense sees it. Look at the key ingredients here. It has to be the unlawful use of violence. Its purpose is to create fear. And what's the end goal? To coerce or force a government or a society to do something, all because of some ideological belief.
Now let's look at the FBI's definition. It's pretty similar, right? But you can see the law enforcement angle. It gets specific about targeting persons or property. The goal here is to achieve political or social objectives. So for the FBI, it's really about the how and the why from the perspective of stopping a crime.
And then we have the United Nations, which gives us this broader international view. The key word here for me is unjustifiable. The UN is basically saying these are criminal acts, period. They're meant to create public terror for political reasons, and there's absolutely no excuse, no political cause, no religious belief that can ever make it okay.
So what does this all boil down to? This chart really breaks it down for us. You can see the common threads, right? Every definition includes violence, some kind of political or social motive, and the goal of creating fear. But check out the small differences. The UN, for example, specifically calls out the targeting of civilians. The other two don't require that as part of the definition, which is a pretty interesting distinction.
Okay, so once you have a working definition, or a few of them, the next step is to start sorting the threat into different categories. Because terrorism isn't just one single thing, it's not a monolith. It shows up in a bunch of different forms, and understanding those categories is key to figuring out how to respond.
We can pretty much break it down into four main types. You've got domestic terrorism, which is homegrown, born and raised right here. Then there's international terrorism, which crosses borders. State-sponsored terrorism is when a government is secretly helping out a terrorist group, giving them money, weapons, training. And then there's state terrorism, and that's when a government turns those exact same tactics of fear and violence against its own citizens.
Now this brings us right to the here and now in the US. This is a really big deal. The official assessment from the entire U.S. intelligence community is crystal clear. The most persistent and the most lethal threats we face today are not from overseas. They're from domestic groups, specifically racially motivated extremists like white supremacists and anti-government militias. So that's the threat. The big question is, how has the United States built a system to fight back? Well, a huge part of the legal and intelligence machine we have today was really forged in the fire of the September 11th attacks. It created this powerful and controversial new toolkit for national security. This timeline shows this really fascinating push and pull between our security and our liberty. Back in the 70s, you had the Church Commission exposing all these intelligence abuses, which led directly to FISA, a law that put up strict walls for spying. But then 9/11 happened, and the Patriot Act came in and basically tore those walls down to connect the dots. Then, fast forward to 2015, and the USA Freedom Act starts to build some of those walls back up, ending the government's bulk collection of our phone data. And this right here is a super important legal difference you have to understand. For a normal criminal warrant, police need probable cause that a crime was committed. Simple enough. But for a FISA warrant, which is approved by a secret court, by the way, the standard is different. You only need probable cause that the person is an agent of a foreign power. The whole purpose is different.
One is for collecting evidence for a trial. The other is for gathering intelligence to stop an attack before it happens.
So, with all that history and all those tools, what's the game plan for today? Facing this rising domestic threat, the U.S. government has put together a really comprehensive whole-of-government strategy to try and tackle it.
It's all built on these 4 pillars. First, you have to actually understand the threat and share that information so everyone's on the same page. Second, you have to prevent people from getting recruited and mobilized in the first place. Third, you have to disrupt and deter the plots that are already in motion. And fourth, and this is the long game, you have to confront the root causes, the things like racism and bigotry that let these hateful ideologies grow.
And that brings us to the most crucial point of all, this incredibly delicate balancing act. The end goal of this whole complex machine, from the definitions to the laws to the strategy, is of course to stop terrorist attacks. But it's just as important to do that while protecting the very civil rights and liberties that this country is supposed to be all about.
And that really leaves us with a big, lingering question, doesn't it? As this threat keeps changing, as technology keeps advancing, and as new ideologies pop up, how do we get that balance right? How do we find the sweet spot between the security we all need and the liberties we all cherish? It's the fundamental challenge, and there are absolutely no easy answers.